to the first car disc-e-oke for 8 Model Psychology. I'm actually going to have to try and keep my eyes firmly on the road because I am actually really driving. And I just wanted to be able to introduce two very dear friends, and well, one is a colleague and one is an ex-colleague now. But essentially it's a very dangerous situation because we have a car full of psychologists. So every week on 8 Model we are going to be introducing and interviewing new people in a fun way. So I'm just going to start by getting you guys just to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you. So Alex.
I'm Alex Summich. I'm a reader in mental health and biopsychology at Nottingham Trent University and adjunct professor at Auckland University of Technology.
Yeah.
I do brain stuff.
And Claire.
Hello, I'm Claire Bloxham. I used to work as a lecturer in psychology at Nottingham Trent University with Alex and with Serena. Still do bits and pieces, but mainly I work as a psychotherapist and counsellor in clinical practice.
That's so exciting. And you made that move really recently, haven't you?
Yeah, I'm still sort of finishing actually, but I've been working in private practice for about 3 years.
So exciting. We're going to hear all about that. So first of all, I just wanted to ask you a standard question that most people, I guess, want to hear about when they meet someone new and they find out what they do, which is, why did you even do psychology? What got you interested in it? So if both of you could answer that would be great.
I was heavily influenced by Ghostbusters, the original movie.
Real? Is that the start when they're doing all the little cards
The
and
card thing,
things?
yeah.
I loved that bit.
And but I was also very interested in counselling and psychotherapy at the beginning of my psychology course. So it's kind of interesting because I started off thinking about psychology and then got lured into brain stuff and biology.
And it's funny because I went the other way. I was really into neuroscience and then went into psychotherapy and counselling.
Mirror images.
Wow. So is that what happened with you? What you just said? What was your interest to start with?
Well, it started with art actually. So I've always loved art.
Your hair gives you away.
I've always loved art. I've always loved music. And so what originally interested me in psychology was how people represent their feelings in ways other than sort of speaking. So singing or creating art forms. And so I actually started studying art history at first and then changed to psychology. And loving psychology because of the way in which we can represent ourselves differently in different forms. And then I ended up getting into forensic psychology. I really enjoyed that. But I'd never really lost my passion for sort of depth psychology and working with people on a one-to-one basis really. So I tend to work quite creatively, clinically now.
Yeah. So what are you actually doing now? So you're doing private work and working in private practice?
I'm self-employed, so I do...
What's that like?
It's
transition.
It's wonderful. I absolutely love it. It is a big transition going from a sort of a lectureship to sort of private practice where it's very independent, but it's my passion, it's what I've always wanted, so I'm really happy.
That's so exciting.
It's a wonderful job to have. It's a privilege.
It's a privilege, isn't it? I always said that. It's a real privilege to hear people's stories and let them let you into their world and into what's going on.
It is so much passion of yours as well. For me, as your friend, seeing you make that transition is just amazing. And all of the challenges that you've faced in doing that. And the way you've grown through that as well, just really good.
Yeah.
I'd say we can all do what we want to do, we just have to put our mind to it.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And that leads very nicely into our first little play. This is where it gets kooky. Okay, let's introduce our first song.
I don't actually know what that is.
Whose is it?
Is it mine?
Let's do yours. Yeah.
Okay. So the song that I have chosen is You've Got the Love by Florence and the Machines, because it appeals to me in terms of human connection, and sometimes we feel a little bit desperate at times, it's natural, but to know that we've got someone who we can connect with is really important, so that's why I chose it.
I don't know this song.
My hands up in the air, I know
I can count on you. Sometimes I feel like saying, Lord, I just don't care, but you got the love I need to see me through. Sometimes I feel the going is just too rough, and things go wrong no matter what I do. You got the love, and you got the love.
I feel very stiff.
You got the love, you got the love, and you got the love I need to see me through. Later in life, the things you love you lose, but you got the love I need to see me through.
So Alex, what research are you taking part in at the moment? Taking part in? No, you're not. You're not
What am I taking part in?
When are you having your brain removed?
Actually, I'm taking part in Eva Zisk's morphing fear study. I just signed my name up to that the other day.
Okay.
That's what I'm taking part
What
in.
research are you doing yourself?
What am I doing myself? Well, we're just writing a paper at the moment on all of these 4,000 species of aliens that live in our guts and control our brains.
Well, tell us more about that.
So there's 4,000 species of aliens that live in your gut and control your brain.
Do you need a psych
Yes.
assessment?
There's
this linked to, like,
so this
serotonin
is
and
about
stuff?
this is about the microbiota and how all of the good bacteria and bad bacteria that live in your intestine can communicate with your brain, both directly and indirectly, and it affects how we think and how we feel.
That's so interesting.
So what we're particularly looking at is a species known as lactobacillus, and what we're seeing in our data is that lactobacillus is the more lactobacillus that you have in your gut, and we measure this through fecal samples. The more lactobacillus that you have in your fecal samples, I should say, the higher your positive regard. So the more positive you judge yourself.
Whoa.
But the lower your levels of empathic distress as well. And these two things are very closely related to symptoms of depression. So sometimes people get depressed because they have poor self-esteem and are hypercritical of themselves. But also we can become depressed because we feel other people's sadness and fear as well. So people who have a very strong empathy with others take that on board as well. And so what we're seeing is with lactobacillus, it rebalances that. So it increases your positive regard and decreases the emotional distress that you feel through empathy.
Wow, that's fascinating. Really interesting stuff. How did you get into that area of research? What drew you to that area?
Okay, so I started off my career in New Zealand, where I was doing some cognitive neuroscience, and moved to London and started research on brain function and psychological health in terms of psychosis and depression. And some of that work was on diet and the way diet can influence our brain function and psychological well-being. At that time I was looking at fatty acids, so fish oils, the omega-3 that you see in everything in supermarkets now. But the reason that it's taken off in such a big way is it's so important for our physical and psychological well-being. And not only are some of these fatty acids incorporated into our brain, and in fact our brain is the fattest organ in the body. So if someone called you a fathead, it's a compliment.
You mean a big head?
A big head.
Don't be so big-headed, Alex.
And fat-headed. But they're also really important for regulating our immune function.
There's a lot more research into this at the moment, isn't there, actually, in terms of that role?
Yeah, and the importance of the immune system in our psychological well-being. So depression is now increasingly known as a disorder of inflammation.
Yes.
And one of the primary causes of depression is low-grade chronic inflammation, and that actually makes it very important in terms of physical health as well. There's a lot of physical disorders are exacerbated by inflammation.
And can diet impact that? Because there's a lot of current research, isn't there, about how diet impacts that in the body?
Yes,
so
definitely.
so kind of forward-thinking practitioners are looking to look at the patient holistically, aren't they? And kind of looking at diet and all sorts of other things as a
Definitely.
contributor. Yeah.
And in fact, we're just developing an international research collaboration to accelerate that kind of research. So looking at the holistic person, we're looking at the way the body functions, the way the brain functions, the way the mind functions, and with specific view of developing and evaluating more holistic medicine. So things like diet, exercise, psychological interventions like mindfulness as well.
It's all basic stuff that people can do at home. That's what's so fascinating.
It is.
Yeah.
I think what's important for me when I hear you say these things is to be mindful of the way that the body communicates to ourselves internally, but also how our bodies communicate with each other in the world.
That is
really
so important, actually, yes. And we're understanding more about what that does to us physically, physiologically as well. For example, there's certain chemicals like oxytocin, which are released when we have social contact.
Yeah. I get it when I see my dog.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Pet therapy even.
Yeah, for sure.
But oxytocin is so important for health, neuroprotection, and mood, and psychological well-being. So how our biochemistry and how physiology interacts with our environment, with the people in our environment, with how we think as well. So, for example, techniques like mindfulness can help regulate our immune system, and that affects our physiology, and then our physiology affects our brain function. So it's all interacted like that.
and affects our thinking patterns as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the problem is that when something goes awry, we get into a vicious cycle. So the body, with physical pain or psychological pain, for example stress or distress, the body releases these chemicals which are known as sort of pro-inflammatory cytokines. And those chemicals will are risk for physical illnesses like arthritis, cancer, MS, a lot of different physical conditions, but they will also change the biochemistry of the brain, and will can lead someone to be more vulnerable to the stress and depression.
So if you were to just kind of as a final kind of nugget of wisdom for people listening, if they wanted to kind of take something away from this, what would you? So you're certainly not kind of prescribing what people do or anything, but what could they take from what you've said? What could they kind of start to implement today to make changes, do you think?
I think just be more mindful about your lifestyle choices, and I think in particular be aware of how your physical condition, your diet and lifestyle choices will not only affect your physical health, but it will affect your psychological health as well.
That's awesome, yeah. So
And the
true.
two are very intimately interrelated.
That's amazing.
The thing that you're missing in that is human interaction, and so yes, it's really important to be mindful of what we're putting into our bodies, and breathing is so very important in terms of regulating our physiology and affect regulation, but also we've got to think about some people might struggle to do that on their own, so it's thinking about, well, how do we
Facilitate that.
facilitate the human connection and relatedness that is so
Absolutely.
important
That is vital.
between people.
Yeah, because also
Exactly.
people need to get that information from somewhere. Some people need the support to actually implement it in their life, don't they? Because they don't know how. and how to do it all.
It's also working through all of the psychological dilemmas that are leading to that state of stress. So if you can help with that, then you're not only helping with the psychological well-being, but you're helping with the physical health of the individual.
Well, that's
as well.
kind of what you do, right? So how would you help someone in that position? You would be facilitating them on their journey, right? If they wanted to make those changes.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we'll take the example of depression, because that is what you were talking about before.
Which is so common.
I mean, I suppose the way I look at it is, it's not really about labelling depression. And this is a bit of a dilemma for me as a psychologist who's moved into sort of one-to-one counselling and therapy, because I suppose we're used to the labels of things like depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, you know,
But
particular
we need to get
mental
away from
health
those labels. Even in science, we need to get away from those labels.
What we need is to focus on the individual as the individual. So the way I work is very different from sort of experimental psychology, which is what I was interested in before, where we're moving out of categories but into the uniqueness of that person. And not only that, but also the uniqueness of that co-created relationship that you're creating and having with a person when you're doing that work. And so yes, that research is really, really important, and yes, those implementations will almost certainly make change. But I suppose from where I'm coming from is healing often happens in a relationship that is safe. And so
So can that be the patient or client therapist relationship, or do you mean people outside of that, or both?
Both. It might be that some clients would come to do some work where there's considerable difficulty in social interaction, for example, and so therefore, in a way, as Irvin Yalom likes to say, therapy is a social microcosm. So you've got two people in a room who are in a very contained environment, but actually it can be reflective in some ways of what life is like outside of the room. So it's really sort of using the therapy relationship as a way to make sense of how we connect with other people, to get that feedback, to get that connection. And so for me, implementing those kinds of sort of ideas, or inviting a client to consider their breathing, to be more mindful of their physiology, is really important. But we are social animals and we work in relationship. So it's about the relationship for me in terms of how to think about well-being, rather than certain specific factors.
I think what's really exciting about everything that's been said is just knowing that people can do things now.
Yes,
So there are things that they can actually do now, for themselves. So changing their diet, exercising, being more active, finding the social support they need, and if it's not within the groups that they currently have, to find it elsewhere, because it exists and people really want to help them in that capacity. So,
and sometimes these things, you know, they really can take time, and that's dependent on so many different factors, that it's kind of impossible to give sort of an overall example, because like I say, the way that I work is that each individual is completely unique, and then when you put a therapist into the mix, that therapist is completely unique, and then that connection that you have, that working relationship that you have, is also completely unique. So it's kind of working with the unknown as well as working with the known, like for example changes in diet and so on and so forth. What I'm really liking is the fact, and it's really weird for me because coming from psychology, psychotherapy, the approach is so very different, yet they're so unitable.
Yeah, they really are.
So and I think there's a lot of politics that make it difficult to be unitable, because they're seen as sort of very different disciplines when actually they're not so different.
No.
And so thinking about what you were talking about, integrating that within the relationship is what I do. So I do a lot of work on breathing. I mean, it depends on the client and what their needs are, of course, but I will focus very much on how is the body communicating to yourself. It's a different language, and we're often not aware of our breathing because we know we can breathe because that's what our body just does.
So becoming more mindful of that. And I see it sometimes as a hand relationship, and that in terms of nutrition and exercise and other lifestyle choices, that sort of thing, physiologically and neurologically, it gives you the resources to be able to work through stuff.
Yeah.
And then along with a psychotherapeutic relationship, that is like the guidance through the stuff that you need to work through.
And also what feels important to say is that sometimes a client might not be able to start with those, say, more practical aspects, because it might be that the self-worth is so low that it takes a relationship, albeit in a professional counselling form, to develop that self-esteem more in the relationship, which then might lend itself to.
It's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because everything that we're talking about is applicable to different groups of people. So there'll be people that really need that intense therapy and support to start with, without even looking at some of the other stuff, because they just need that input straight away, because they are really struggling. But then you've just got like the worried well, who we can all benefit from this. Doesn't kind of matter where you are, we could all be more mindful, we could all focus more on the things that you're talking about. We do need positive social interactions with people that really genuinely support us. So they are things that we all actually need to be kind of fully functioning and feel content and happy.
And essentially all of us are worried well.
Yeah, I mean, exactly, that's what I mean, like we all fit that category.
Because it's everybody is human, therefore we're always going to feel a bit depressed sometimes, or low in mood.
Unless you're a psychopath.
Unless you're a psychopath, which is for a different interview.
There's a whole other interview.
So we're going to do this Crowded
House. Let's just do it. Okay, so I've chosen this song. Oh, it's gone. This is Weather With You by Crowded House. Crowded House is one of my absolute favourite bands in the whole world, and I lived in New Zealand for many years. It's a place that's very dear to me, and it's really apt today because the weather is quite frankly shit. And so, yeah, here we go.
I'm a part-time singer.
Walking round the room singing stormy weather at 57 Mount Pleasant Street.
I am not a natural.
Like a bird release. Always take the weather everywhere you go. Always take the weather with you everywhere you go. Always take the weather with you.
Tell us, okay, Claire, why the Pet Shop Boys? What is the significance of this group for you? So let's end on this lovely, significant story. She's like, no, I just want to sing it.
Well, it is important. So I said earlier that what got me into psychology was music and art. And when I was growing up, I was watching Top of the Pops. It was 1986, and I saw.
You were born before 1986.
I know it's a shock for everyone, but it was 1986. I won't reveal my age, but at that point, I switched on Top of the Pops, and I just saw these two fabulous people singing, and I thought to myself,
What a wonderful world.
That's not the Pet Shop Boys. I thought to myself, I completely love them. I love everything about them. I love the way that they make social commentary about the world. I love the way they use their voice. So Neil Tennant, the singer, who I think is amazing.
In case you're watching this, Neil.
Yeah, just in case. I love you, and I always have. I love the way that they were so original at the time, actually, making social commentary, but also the use of a sort of different type of voice that Neil uses. He sort of often talks in his music, or he used to, and I just was really struck by it, and I really connected with it, and I've loved them ever since. And so for me, I guess it's a sort of emotional connection that I have with them.
Music does that, doesn't it?
Yeah, and so it feels a bit kind of wrong to not have something by them.
So sock it to us. What song have you chosen?
Well, I've chosen a song that I think most people will know, as opposed to my very favourite one by them.
Is that a B-sider?
Yes, well, it's on. My favourite song is King's Cross, which is on Actually, which was released in 1987. But
Very good with your years.
well, I am when it comes to the Pet Shop Boys.
Mastermind, specialist
Yeah, I know,
topic,
specialist
Pet Shop
topic,
Boys.
Pet Shop
Yeah.
Boys.
There are people who know even more than me, believe you me.
Believe you me.
Yeah,
Believe you me.
I'm choosing What Have I Done to Deserve This?
Yay.
Because Dusty Springfield was in it. Lots of people love her too, so she was an icon for me as well.
She was, Dusty.
Yeah.
It's the 80s. Oh, I remember it since you went away.
Because that's what happened in the 80s.
You always wanted a lover. I only wanted a job. I've always worked for a living. How am I gonna get through? Tell me, what have I done to deserve this? What have I done to deserve this? Since you went away, I've been hanging around. How am I gonna get through? How am I gonna get through the night? What have I done to deserve this? How am I gonna get through?
What have I done to deserve this?
How am I gonna get through?
Yay, high fives, high fives. Thank you guys so much. Right. Oh, we're still recording. And on we go with the show.
Oh no, please! Just tiny bit of Pet Shop Boys.
No, we will. So actually, just
Connected off, didn't I? Because
connected off.
I connected off in it.
When you wanna come, no direction, yeah, yeah. Bring it on, hit me with those laser beams. Ow, 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 ow.
Hang on, I am pissing my pants. Do you know why? Do you know why? Claire's like, I've just got to be really professional. Laser beam! Claire wants to be seen to be professional at all times. Could you please
This
find
is her being
12
professional.
seconds where she might be doing that? Boom! And the guns were out and everything. Yeah, a model that is about play.
Is this being recorded?
So,
It is
no,
being
it's
recorded.
not. Oh, it f***ing is.